Today we're going to review my favorite and probably the most infamous of all the antidepressant commercials from the 2000s. This is the infamous Zoloft jumping blob commercial, and it has so many terrible ideas about depression in there, and I just can't wait to go through it with you. So let's check it out.
You know when you're not feeling like yourself. You're tired all the time. You may feel sad, hopeless, and lose interest in things you once loved. You may feel anxious, can't even sleep. Your daily activities and relationships suffer. You know when you just don't feel right. Now here's something you may not know. These are some symptoms of depression, a serious medical condition affecting over 20 million Americans.
That's like the first thing right there. A serious medical condition. Now, the whole idea of depression being a medical condition was thought that maybe if we call it a medical condition, it'll be less stigmatizing. People aren't going to go around and say, hey, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps or snap out of it. We'll say it's a medical condition so people have less shame about it. And sure, I think that's a good thing, to be kinder to people who are suffering, but it's also misleading to make them think that there's something biologically wrong with them.
While the cause is unknown, depression may be related to an imbalance of naturally occurring chemicals between nerve cells in the brain. Zoloft, a prescription medicine, works to correct this imbalance. When you know more about what's wrong, you can help make it right.
They kind of go into this thing where, hey, that depression you might be going through may be due to an imbalance in chemicals in your brain. This was never found. No evidence ever shown that depression is due to a chemical imbalance. And then they have the graphic showing the serotonin reuptake inhibition, and it's, oh my God, it's correcting this known underlying biological process, almost like how a diabetic would need insulin. It's this well-defined thing. It's a complete lie. And then they move on to this next phase where it's like, if you know more about what's wrong, you can start making it right. Anyone worth their salt in psychiatry, probably even back in the early 2000s, would know that understanding depression at the level of some kind of chemical imbalance is the worst way to look at something that is mostly due to stresses in someone's life. Sure, there's some genetic components, but the majority of where depression comes from is life hardship. Making people think that they need to intervene at the level of the brain with a drug is completely dangerous, really. It distracts them from the real problems that they could actually fix that would be better for them long-term and more sustainable and even have less side effects. So let's keep on checking this out.
Only your doctor can diagnose depression. Zoloft is not for everyone. People taking medicines called MAOI shouldn't take Zoloft. Side effects may include dry mouth, insomnia, sexual side effects, diarrhea, nausea, and sleepiness. Zoloft is not habit-forming.
Yeah, so there's a few things here. They miss the most important side effects. They miss that it can make people suicidal sometimes by causing adverse reactions. It can make people switch into bipolar. It can cause a serious dependence and lead to really bad withdrawal reactions. Sometimes they even cause a protracted withdrawal injury with long-term neurological damage. They don't talk about persistent sexual dysfunction, which, granted, they didn't know about back then. These were essentially the ads that were going around in the early 2000s that really shaped the way the public looked at these medications as not being that harmful. They even say, it's not habit forming because they don't want people to think it's addictive. Again, it's this kind of play on words, because most people would probably consider, like, if you took a drug and then you couldn't stop it without a severe withdrawal, they might throw that in the category of an addictive drug. And that's definitely what Zoloft is. You adapt to it and then you can't stop it.
Talk to your doctor about Zoloft, the #1 prescribed brand of its kind. Zoloft. When you know more about what's wrong, you can help make it right.
And then there's that whole idea of speaking to your doctor about it, which sounds like a nice thing, but the reality is, even back then in the early 2000s, already the practice of family medicine and psychiatry was becoming very industrialized. It was super short transactional visits. These doctors don't really have time to get to know their patients, to figure out what's happening in their life. So they have depression. The doctors would also say, oh, maybe you have a chemical imbalance. I'll just write this script. And so they got millions of people essentially on these medications long-term over a line, and the doctors never really helped them address modifiable stresses in their life. This is the most famous antidepressant video with the jumping blob. Totally misleading, aged very poorly, and I hope you enjoyed this review.